Why are some of y'all still not washing your hands? You're a freaking disgrace. Welcome, my fellow wannabes. Welcome to my channel. As you may know, I am Gabriel Fast, and I claim to be the wannabe critic, even though all of us really are whenever we want to be. That's kind of funny. Anyways, if you came to this video, you've decided you're going to self-quarantine, or you've been told to quarantine yourself, which in that case, I'm so sorry. Either way, you're going to benefit from this video, and here's why. I'm bringing you a new video today telling you to stream these 10 albums over the course of the next however long because they're great. And I've made a video recently about, these are albums that you probably have never heard. This is kind of going to be along those same lines, and these are albums that I just, for whatever reason, I keep going back to. I think they're definitely worth your time, definitely worth listening to. In my opinion, these albums are just, they're special, and I actually had some help making this video. My brother called me up and he's like, dude, you should totally do a video where you tell people to listen to certain albums because of the coronavirus. And, what good is life if you can't try and find some light out of a kind of crappy situation? I thought I would do my due diligence by trying to bring you a video like this in true wannabe critic fashion. Here we go! The first album on this list is actually an album that I put in another video. It's Stateless by Matilda. Now, I went back through this album not too long ago. I say that nobody really sounds like Stateless, but that's not true. I think that they pull from a lot of different influences, especially Radiohead being one of them, especially around the Kid A / In Rainbows era. There's lots of hints of that within this album, so if you like those albums, you probably would like Matilda by Stateless. They also have a self-titled album that I don't think is quite as good. There's a couple of songs that kind of capture the Matilda vibe within that self-titled record, but I don't think it's necessarily quite as good as Matilda. Definitely worth your time. Check it out. The next album on this list is a guy that I think is really very talented, and I think he's pretty slept on. He came on the scene like 2015, 2016. He was on Jimmy Fallon, and I followed him. I saw him playing a song, and it was like the day that he was on Jimmy Fallon, I watched his performance, and he had like 2,000 followers on Instagram or something like that. And then the next day he had like 10,000 after he played on Jimmy Fallon. So it was kind of crazy, that he was able to get on the show and like play, but he focuses like kind of on like the old 70s like folk singer piano type vibe. And I mean, it's just very sorrowful, and I don't know, it kind of makes you think about your life a little bit. I think there's all these albums have things about them that totally make you think about your life and just like get you to think in general, and I think that's why these albums are going to potentially could be on your rotation within the next few weeks. Definitely give Tobias Jesso Jr.'s album a listen. It's called Goon. The next album on this list is a band that's gotten quite a bit of popularity over the past 5 or 6 years, and that's Beach House, and the album I want to talk about is Bloom. Now, Bloom is also kind of like this ambient, like really gothic electronic type vibe to it, and that whole album is just, you can sit down and listen to it from beginning to end. Want to listen to it again as soon as you finish it. I really think that if you've never heard of Beach House, at this point there's a really good chance that you have. I definitely think you should check this album out. They're kind of like in the same vein as like Cigarettes After Sex, or like Tame Impala, or even something kind of like MGMT, kind of like in that same vein of artists, I would say. So if you like any of those artists I just said, and if you like Beach House but you've never listened to Bloom, I highly recommend you listen to Bloom. The next album on this list is a little bit, whenever you're feeling down, like you're in the slump, you're like, oh man, I've been home for like 5 days and I've listened to these first 3 albums so many times. What do I do now? This is what you do. You pop in Wonder What's Next by Chevelle. Their key song off that album, Send the Pain Below. I guess The Red could be like a key track as well. There's something about this album that just kind of has like a magic to it. You listen to this album, you're like, wow, that sound is coming out of 3 guys. And it's kind of weird when you think about it. Same thing with like whenever you listen to a Nirvana record, it's like, how can you, even with production, how do you get 3 people to make a sound like that? And you can even watch some of their live performances of this album and see just how big and bombastic their sound and how tight they are as a band. I hope that you've listened to Chevelle before. If not, Wonder What's Next, I hope you've listened to some of their other albums. So definitely check this one out if you never have before, and rock out while you do. The next song on this list, I actually tweeted this out, which you can follow me at the Wannabe Critic on Twitter. I said a long time ago, there's not a better like winter album, just because it just kind of makes you think and like encompasses the whole vibe of like a depressing situation, and that is An Awesome Wave by Alt J. There's something about that album, like from the very beginning, it has like this like really dark groove to it, and like you kind of get into it, and like there's no other band out there that sounds like Alt J. The guy has a very distinct voice. The lead singer, he sounds a certain way that not many people, I mean, you hear him in interviews and he's talking kind of like how I'm talking right now, but then like when you listen to the music, it's like it's just the weirdest thing ever, but I dig it. So if you have ever listened to them but couldn't get into them, give An Awesome Wave another chance. I think you'll really be into it. The next album on this list is another one that I've talked about in previous videos, and that is Ghost Stories by Coldplay. This is one of the best albums that Coldplay has put out. Chris Martin was going through a divorce with Gwyneth Paltrow, and that's basically what this album is about. This is most definitely their saddest album, but there's a hopefulness to it as well. So I don't know. I think I just whacked the camera. I'm sorry. If you're having a hard time, I would say, listen to this album and kind of reflect on, your loved ones and your situation, and realize that, things are going to get better eventually, but you have to believe. You gotta believe, man. The next album on this list is one that I don't think many of you have probably ever heard of before. Maybe you have, I don't know. It's by a DJ, his name is Danger Mouse. He worked with lots of people on this record. He worked with Jack White, he worked with Danielle Lupe, I think is how you say her name. Nora Jones was a part of this project, and it's just called Rome. And there's just something kind of haunting about this album. That all of these albums kind of have, except a couple of them, all of these albums have kind of a haunting feeling to them. They have kind of a distinct vibe of, sad yet hopeful at the same time. And I definitely think that this album is very nostalgic for me, because I listened to it in a time that was really weird for me. I was, an adolescent, and this was presented to me, and it's very off the beaten path for my normal taste in music, but I think it's definitely worth your time, so you should definitely check it out. It's also kind of out of the realm of what Danger Mouse has done in the past. So, if you're familiar with Danger Mouse, that's one thing I wanted to add. If you're familiar with Danger Mouse and you want to check out something a little bit different that he's done before, definitely give this a chance to give it a day in court. The next album on this list is by Death Cab for Cutie, and it's called Transatlanticism, which arguably within the fan base is the band's best album. I would have to agree. There is just something different about this album, and I don't think you really ever get the same feeling out of any of their other albums than you do with this album. This album definitely was very influential on me. I listened to it much later after it had come out. I listened to this around 2015, 2016, but this came out much earlier than that, and I wasn't aware of what kind of impact it was going to have on me, especially the song off the record Expo 86, which is by far my favorite album, my favorite song off of the album. If you like Death Cab for Cutie, you like them, you probably already know this album, but if you like some of their later stuff, I highly recommend you go back to this album and spin it 2 or 3 times, because it is definitely worth it. I definitely wanted to put it on my, top 10 albums or top 5 albums that you've probably never listened to, or, like the rejects list. I've definitely wanted to put it on a list like that, but haven't had the chance until now. It's definitely a perfect album to stream while you're quarantined. The next album on this list, we're kind of sad, more and sad, and now we're about to rock out again with some Deftones. The album Koi no Yokan, I think is how you pronounce it. This is Deftones' 4th or 5th album, I believe, and there is just something really special. I think this is the closest we ever get to White Pony again, which White Pony came out in 2000, which I was in kindergarten when White Pony came out. Koyo no Kan came out in 2012, which, that's 12 years later after White Pony, and the band put out several albums in between those 2 periods, but this to me is like a close second for Deftones, for it being as good as White Pony, which White Pony is Deftones' best album. It is, for sure, and if you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend you listen to that one as well. But there's just kind of like there's a groove throughout the entire album, and it's another testament to see, that just shows how good of a band you are whenever you consistently make music that sticks to your niche, but at the same time feels fresh and new each time. This definitely is a tried and true Deftones record, and if you've never listened to it, you should go listen to it right now. Maybe even first, before you listen to any of these other albums. The final album on this list, which I know we've only been talking for a few minutes, but, you know, I could go probably on 5-10 minutes for each of these albums, but I'm trying to limit myself to like 60 to like 120 seconds. That way this album isn't forever long. But the last album on this list is Ukulele Songs by Eddie Vedder. I was shopping earlier today and trying to find, you know, like necessities that I could have for the next couple weeks. I wasn't like stocking up. I was just kind of getting like a backup. My wife's actually at the store right now getting what I missed. But it's kind of crazy going through Walmart and just seeing like all these empty shelves of stuff. Because I don't know if you guys are like me, but I usually will listen to music while I'm doing anything, while I'm out and about, while I'm, you know, walking around in the grocery store. I try my best to, you know, keep my wits about me and pay attention to what's going on. I don't put my head down and just walk with headphones, but I try my best, you know, and that's how I get a lot of albums listened to. I live on a farm, so that's also how I listen to a lot of the music that I review. But I was listening to this record, you know, seeing if I could justify putting it on this list, and there were things that I was doing when I was listening to this album 6 or 7 years ago that are literally just like burned in my mind. And I think that's what happens whenever you do something enough times, or you're subjected to something enough time. Then later on in life is whenever it kind of becomes nostalgic. And I've talked about how in other videos how I've listened to music while I would play video games, and there's just certain games and certain things that like flash back in my mind. And no doubt I'm going to remember a time where I was listening to this album all the time, and it's just a nice feeling. And I think if you listen to this album enough times while you're going through something, you know, all of these albums even can help you kind of cope with something that you might be going through and make you really think about your life. And I guess that's what I'm trying to get, is I totally think that this album does a really good job of just making you feel, I don't know, it just makes you feel whimsical. I think that's the right word. Definitely worth your time. And I'd forgotten about this album. So I'm going to say that, you know, it's really, really good. Now, it goes without saying, I think all of these albums are worth buying on vinyl. So that's like the highest score that I can give an album, is it's worth buying on vinyl. All of these are worth buying on vinyl. So you should definitely stream them all while you're being quarantined, while you're trying to socially distance yourself from people. You need books. You need your family. You need, you know, things to do. You need music. So here I am, the wannabe critic, trying to give you a few albums to listen to over the course of the next few weeks for what's to come. If this is your first time here, I would ask that you consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to me. I'm trying to do this, you know, like for work, video work and audio work and things like that. So, you know, definitely let me know what you think of this video. Definitely let me know where I can improve, what you think I can do better, and I would seriously appreciate it. I'm really paranoid because I'm looking at my camera and I'm looking at like the articulation from my camera, and I'm just so concerned that I'm out of focus, so I hope I'm not, but if I am, I apologize. The last video I put out was kind of blurry. As always, thank you for keeping up. Again, consider subscribing if this is your first time here, and thank you for preparing yourselves for a plethora of hot takes and potentially unpopular opinions. I'm Gabriel Fast. I will always be the wannabe critic.